Welcome to this Frontiers Web Extra. We have Michael Carey, a longtime Anchorage Daily News columnist, and Tim Bradner, who, with his brother Mike, publishes the Alaska Legislative Digest. Let's start with you, because you and your brother have certainly had your work cut out for you this session. Our topic this week on Frontiers has been the recall movement, which has added, more drama to an already dramatic year. But what are you seeing from your perspective?
Oh, this is, nobody ever said politics is dull in Alaska, but this year takes the cake. This is a great time to be a reporter in Juneau. Somebody said that about Washington, D.C. also.
Yeah, but you probably put in it's probably almost a 24/7 stint.
Well, a lot of other people are working a lot, doing that, and more so than I am. Rhonda, one thing I want to say about University of Alaska Fairbanks, and you mentioned my brother, we're both UAF people. So
we talk about that on the Frontiers show, the impact of some of what Dunleavy wants to cut on the university system.
Yeah. And we talked about the museum, and the cut that he's proposed for the museum would be devastating to it. I don't see how they could survive and stay open.
Well, I think Donna Arduin had put in the budget line to be made up for by fees.
Very unrealistic. And I think the reason for that is the museum at the Fairbanks does a lot more than just is a museum for people to come and visit. It does actually its own research programs. Years ago, I had a chance with my daughter working on a science project to take a behind-the-scenes tour, and I was amazed at all of the original research that museum does, working with grants, federal grants, but also you have to have state funds that support some of that.
And what's interesting is the students do a lot of that research, so they get their hands onto something real.
That's true. And another thing a lot of folks don't realize about the UAF Museum is that they are a world-class and world-known repository for Arctic artifacts. There are collections from the Canadian Arctic, archaeological collections, and Russia that are on permanent loan to UAF, and there's contracts that UAF is signed to maintain and preserve those, make them available for research.
So in other words, it's not like they can just turn off the lights.
No, this is complicated.
And also the whole business about charging people more. There is a range of what you can charge people when you go to the museum, and the top
they're already charging big ticket.
The biggest, most influential, famous museums in the United States, they have a rate, and then they have a geezer rate for people like myself, but you can't charge more than the Metropolitan Museum of New York. In New York, to go to a museum in Fairbanks, you just can't do that. People won't go.
No, but we only talked in the Frontiers program about the university cuts and how devastating they are to the community of Fairbanks, but some of the proposed cuts that are still out there waiting to happen affect some of the most vulnerable Alaskans.
Well, and the Medicaid cuts, for example, the senior citizen cuts, and I want to make one point about the future of how this whole recall may play out. Sometime in December, Tim probably knows the exact date, the governor is going to have to offer Alaskans his budget for next year. That budget will tell us what he intends to do next year, and if he's consistent, it'll be more of this and more reason to get people mad while they're shopping for their Christmas presents.
Well, most of the people that we talked to said that the budget cuts were the reason that they wanted Governor Dunleavy to be removed from office, but actually the grounds that the recall group put forward don't involve the budget cuts so much. Other legal questions. How far are they going to get with that? Do you think that that's going to get bogged down in the courts?
Well, probably, undoubtedly there's going to be lawsuits, probably at several points along the way, but it is pretty clear that you have to demonstrate incompetence, which, the recall organizers have cited a couple of examples of what they argue as incompetence. Sloppy work by the administration. It has to demonstrate other things. One thing that's cited in the recall petition is the very grave error that the administration made in exceeding the veto for Medicaid more than what they told the legislature, and then that resulted in a $18 cut in state funds and a $40 million cut in federal funds. by
So
mistake.
it cost us potentially 40 million, maybe.
Yeah, well, but that was done by mistake, but they did not go back and correct it. So the recall cites that as an example of
The courts
sloppy
have
work.
been, in Alaska, very liberal on voter initiatives, for example. And I would expect to be something similar here as to some degree. I mean, they can't just violate the law, the courts can't, but they can defer to the voters. And, what is incompetence? I'm sure the ground, since it really hasn't been played out here before, what would that mean exactly? And as far as people signing the petition because they believe one thing when they're mad about the budget and that's not on the petition. I mean, we have no religious requirement for voting. Yet there are many people who say, "Well, why did you vote for a certain candidate?" They'll say, "Because he's a Christian." So that you don't have to match up your grounds for signing it with what's on the petition.
So what's your prediction about how far this petition is going to get?
I think this is very different than anything we've ever seen here because of the widespread anxiety that the governor has created and he personally has created and the attack on the university. I think it's going to be very difficult to get to the 71,000 signatures. The petitioners are going to need money, but I think it's possible, and I think it's very possible that we will have a recall election.
And now you also see groups falling into this. And we didn't mention in the program that the Surrey Native Corporation now supports this recall movement. How significant is that?
Tim, why don't you take a shot at that?
I think it's very significant because Surrey is based in Anchorage. It's not a rural regional corporation. Undoubtedly, some of the rural corporations may follow suit, but Surrey is sort of symbolic. It's one of the most influential of the Alaska Native corporations. It kind of sets the standard for some of the others sometimes. So I think it's very important.
What do you think the North Slope Borough residents are going to say? The governor wants to take away their taxing power
Will it be interesting
on oil.
It'll be interesting to see because a couple of Native corporations, Chalista being one of them, the Native Corporation for Southwest Alaska, and also ASRC, the Arctic Slope Corporation, they also endorsed Dunleavy. So I'm curious to see what those corporations do.
Well, I can't believe that ASRC would, after the differences they've had with the governor on policy matters since he's been elected, would not oppose him.
I think the fact that the governor wanted to rip out the tax base
Right.
for the North Slope Borough. Obviously, the North Slope Borough and ASRC are very close. They represent the same constituencies. So I think that would have a telling difference. In Chalista's case, I think their endorsement of Dunleavy, there were other issues involved in that. I can't remember.
But
just what they were, but-
their shareholders are going to be affected.
Yes.
Probably be the hardest hit
That's right.
in the state
That's right.
from some of the governor's cuts. Just in fairness to the governor, I just want to throw this out there and see what you think is. I think Dunleavy has seen his role, at least it appears that way, as kind of a disruptor, someone who kind of wants to create chaos so that you can clean the slate and start anew and rebuild things. And some of his supporters have said he's doing the state a real favor by, because would the university system ever think about consolidating?
There definitely is an audience for that, and he does have his supporters and people who believe he is doing the right thing. But beyond saying we have to do this because we don't have the money, he's done a very poor job of articulating why and how and his concern for the people who are affected.
I mean, I have to sort of wonder what his thought process is if your goal is to disrupt or to accomplish, I'm not sure where he's coming from.
Rhonda, that takes me back to a point I made, I think, during the program, that he has to be able to communicate to the electorate why this is good for us, where this is going, what his vision for the positive future is. And he isn't able to do that. It's just disruptor. There's a certain logic you can see in that if you've got a structure, a bureaucracy, a government, or a university that's become so ossified over the years, so bureaucratic, that it's very difficult or impossible to change from within or to even gradually change. You can make an argument for a wrecking ball type approach. Go in, break it apart, and let it come back together. But he has to communicate that. What's good at the end of the road? Where's the rainbow?
Where is the rainbow? Michael?
I've got final word.
Yeah, the last word.
Yeah, I've criticized Dunleavy quite a bit on this show, but he is a very interesting governor. He's one of the more interesting I've had an opportunity to watch in Alaska. And part of why he's so interesting to me is his background. He comes from Scranton, Pennsylvania, from a working class background. He went to a Catholic college. He was raised in Scranton in this very democratic Joe Biden environment. And I don't know what happened or why he changed. People change all the time, and I don't expect people to be exactly like their parents. I'm certainly not in my own case. But his politics are very different from the political atmosphere that he grew up in.
Well, one of the things that I've been curious about is, so far he doesn't seem to have been influenced by the things he's experienced, or at least that we know he experienced, going to rural Alaska, being a teacher, being a superintendent, going to the University of Alaska, Fairbanks.
I think he would dispute all of that and say, look at my wife, look at my children. I graduated at the University of Alaska. I care, just I'm expressing it differently.
But maybe he cares for what he believes is the big picture, that we live within our means. But still, power cost equalization, that is a program that he should know means so much to rural Alaskans.
Tim, isn't he going to say that came back and power cost equalization is going to be great? Isn't that what he's going to say now?
I think he'll try next year to get it again. Just a thought that I wanted to say is I've been struck by almost the party atmosphere of some of the recall
yes,
initiatives.
Exactly.
Happy days are here again.
I went as a journalist. I went to the launch a couple weeks ago, and it was a party. There were balloons. There were people playing music. There was kind of a happy atmosphere about it. And what struck me about it is that this whole spring, everybody's been so depressed by all the bad news, budget cuts, this and that, and it was kind of like a catharsis. I mean, there's something good out there, something we can do about this. Now, whether it's good or not, who knows? But at least I had that feeling that people had been depressed. It had not been communicated to them what's good about all this, and here's a chance to do something we can feel good about. So ergo, the party, the music, the balloons.
Well, stay tuned. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us, Tim Bradner and Michael Carey. Thanks for weighing in.